The thing about betrayal is that you always see it coming, even when you don't want to believe your own eyes. I'd been married to Helen for 8 years. 8 years of waking up before dawn to tend the cattle. 8 years of coming home smelling like hay and manure. 8 years of watching her smile fade like paint on a barn left too long in the sun. I'm Miles Carter, and I make my living the old-fashioned way, working land that my grandfather worked, raising beef cattle and crops on 300 acres outside of town. It's honest work, hard work, the kind that leaves your hands rough and your back sore, but lets you sleep at night knowing you earned every dollar. That Tuesday afternoon in late September, I'd driven into town to pick up some veterinary supplies. The feed store closes at 5, and I was running behind schedule. I took the shortcut past the Riverside Motel, a rundown place on Highway 41 that rents rooms by the hour to people who don't want anyone knowing their business. The neon sign flickers even in daylight, half the letters burned out so it just reads, Motel. That's when I saw her. Helen was walking out of room 12, and she wasn't alone. The man with her was young, maybe mid-20s, wearing expensive jeans and a polo shirt that probably cost more than I spend on clothes in a year. He had his hand on the small of her back, that intimate gesture that speaks louder than words. They stopped by a silver BMW, and she turned to face him. He leaned down and kissed her. Not a peck on the cheek. A real kiss. The kind that said this wasn't their first time. I pulled over 2 blocks down, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. My heart was hammering in my chest, but my mind went cold and clear. Some men would have stormed back there, made a scene, maybe thrown punches. I've never been that kind of man. My father taught me that anger without planning is just waste. I sat there for 10 minutes, watching in the rearview mirror as they said their goodbyes. The BMW pulled out first, heading north toward the nicer part of town. Helen got into her Honda and drove south, probably heading home to start dinner like nothing happened. I didn't follow her. Instead, I drove to the feed store, picked up my supplies, and headed home. When I walked through the door at 6:15, Helen was in the kitchen, humming along to the radio while she chopped vegetables for a salad. "Hey, honey," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "How was your day?" "Same as always," I replied, hanging my hat on the hook by the door. "Cattle don't take days off." She laughed, that practiced laugh she'd perfected over the years. "I made meatloaf. Should be ready in about 20 minutes. I watched her move around the kitchen, this woman I'd loved since I was 28 years old. She'd been working at the truck stop diner when we met, bringing me coffee and pie with a smile that made me forget I'd been up since 4 in the morning. She had dark hair that caught the light, and eyes that seemed to hold secrets even then. Maybe they did. Maybe I'd just been too young and stupid to notice. "How was your day?" I asked, sitting down at the kitchen table. "Oh, boring." She didn't even hesitate. "Did some laundry, cleaned the bathroom, went to the grocery store. The usual." The lies came so easily to her. That's what struck me most. Not the affair itself. I'd suspected something for months now, the way she'd become distant, the unexplained charges on her credit card, the late nights when she claimed to be at her book club. No. What got me was how smoothly she could look me in the eye and lie without a single tremor in her voice. We ate dinner in relative silence. She asked about the cattle. I told her about the new calf that had been born that morning. Normal conversation between 2 people who'd been together long enough that they didn't need to fill every silence. Except now, the silence felt different. It felt like a chasm. After dinner, I told her I had paperwork to do in the office. Instead, I sat at my desk and started making plans. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, Spab Miller. Spab and I went back 20 years to high school football and summer jobs baling hay. He'd gone through a rough patch in his 20s, got himself into some trouble with unpaid tickets and a suspended license. I'd helped him out, paid his fines, Let him stay in my barn apartment until he got back on his feet. Now he worked at Miller's Impound and Towing, and he owed me more favors than either of us could count. I didn't call him that night. First, I needed information. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a man I didn't recognize. I installed a tracking app on Helen's phone while she was in the shower. I checked our bank statements and credit card bills, going back 6 months. I followed her twice, staying far enough back that she'd never spot my truck. What I found made my stomach turn. The affair had been going on for 4 months. She'd been meeting him at the Riverside Motel every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Her book club, as it turned out, didn't exist. The charges I'd seen on her credit card, dinners at expensive restaurants, new lingerie, a hotel room in the city 50 miles away, all of it was for him. His name was Louis Brennan. 24 years old, worked in sales at his father's insurance company, drove that silver BMW, and lived in a condo downtown that his parents helped pay for. I learned all this from a cousin of mine who works at the DMV and owed me a favor for helping him fix his roof last spring. Louis had everything handed to him. He'd never worked a day of hard labor in his life, never understood what it meant to earn something through sweat and sacrifice. And somehow, he'd convinced my wife that he was worth throwing away 8 years of marriage. The worst part was realizing how much money Helen had spent on this affair. New dresses, new makeup, salon appointments, even a new perfume I'd complimented her on just last week. All of it was for him. Money that came from our joint account, money I'd earned feeding cattle in freezing rain and mending fences until my hands bled. On the 3rd Thursday of October, Helen announced over breakfast that she needed to visit her mother upstate for the weekend. "Mom's been feeling poorly," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I thought I'd drive up there tomorrow, stay through Sunday, keep her company." Her mother lived in Florida. She'd moved there 5 years ago to be closer to her sister. Helen was betting I wouldn't remember that detail or wouldn't care enough to question it. "That's thoughtful of you," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "I hope she feels better soon." Helen looked relieved. "Thanks, honey. I knew you'd understand." That's when I knew it was time to act. That evening, after Helen went to bed, I called Spab. "Miles Carter," he said when he picked up, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes. "Haven't heard from you in a minute. What's going on?" "I need a favor," I said. "The kind you don't ask questions about." There was a pause. "All right, I'm listening." "There's a silver BMW, license plate HGR 4721. Tomorrow afternoon around 3 o'clock, it's going to be parked at the Riverside Motel on Highway 41. I need you to tow it to your lot." "You want me to tow a car from private property?" Spab asked. "Miles, that's—" "I know what it is," I interrupted, "and I know you can make it look legitimate. Say there was a complaint about abandoned vehicles, say the owner didn't pay their motel bill, I don't care. Just get that car to your lot and keep it there until Saturday morning." Another pause, longer this time. "This got something to do with Helen?" Spab had always been perceptive. "Yeah," I admitted. "It does." "Say no more," he said. "Consider it done. But Miles, you be careful. Whatever you're planning, make sure it don't come back on you." "It won't," I promised. Friday morning, Helen packed her overnight bag with more care than I'd seen her take in years. She put on makeup, styled her hair, wore the new blue dress I'd seen on the credit card statement, all for a sick mother in a state 600 miles away. "Drive safe," I told her as she headed for the door. "Call me when you get there." "I will," she said, kissing my cheek. Her perfume smelled expensive. "Love you." "Love you too," I said, and watched her drive away. I waited an hour, then called Tommy and Jack, 2 of my ranch hands who'd worked for me for the past 3 years. They were good men, loyal, and they'd both been around long enough to know something wasn't right between Helen and me. "Boys," I said when they came into the barn office, "I need to ask you something, and you're free to say no. Won't affect your jobs either way." Tommy, the older of the 2 at 45, crossed his arms. "What do you need, boss?" There's a man who's been disrespecting me and my family, I said carefully. I want to send him a message. Nothing permanent, nothing that'll land anyone in jail. Just enough to make him understand he's made a mistake. Jack, who was 32 and built like a linebacker, nodded slowly. We talking about the guy with the BMW? The one who's been sniffing around your wife? So they'd known. Of course they'd known. Ranch gossip travels faster than wildfire. Yeah, I admitted. That's the one. When and where? Tommy asked. Today around 5 o'clock. The impound lot on Industrial Road. His car's getting towed there this afternoon. When he shows up to get it back, I want you two to have a conversation with him. Nothing that'll put him in the hospital. Just a few quick hits to let him know this situation is unacceptable. Stomach, maybe the ribs. Don't touch his face too much. I don't want this traced back to us. They exchanged a look. You paying us extra for this? Jack asked. $500 each, I said. Cash. Done, Tommy said. Jack nodded his agreement. At 3 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from Spob. Package secured. I allowed myself a small smile. Lewis would be discovering his missing car right about now, probably standing in the motel parking lot in confusion, calling the police to report it stolen. Eventually, someone would tell him it had been towed for a parking violation. By the time he got to the impound lot, Tommy and Jack would be waiting. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing normal ranch work, fixing a section of fence, checking on the pregnant heifers. Physical work has always helped me think clearly. Around 6 o'clock, Tommy called. It's done, he said simply. Guy's not seriously hurt, just scared and sore. We didn't say much, just made it clear he should stay away from things that don't belong to him. Any problems? I asked. Nope. He was too shocked to fight back much. Don't think he'll be filing any police reports either. Good work, I said. Come by the office Monday, I'll have your payment. That night my phone rang at 8:30. Helen's name flashed on the screen. Hi, honey, I answered. How's your mom? She's fine, Helen stammered. There was something off in her voice. Listen, I might come home early. Tomorrow instead of Sunday. I'm not feeling well. Everything okay? I asked, though I knew exactly what was happening. Lewis had called her, probably exaggerating his injuries, scared and confused about who'd jumped him. Yeah, just a headache. I think I need to be home in my own bed. Well, drive safe, I said. I'll see you tomorrow. After we hung up, I poured myself a whiskey and sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the pastures. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Helen came home Saturday afternoon, pulling into the driveway with red-rimmed eyes and a face that looked like she hadn't slept. I was in the barn, and I watched through the window as she got out of the car, moving slowly, like every step hurt. I gave her an hour before I went into the house. She was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. That was a quick trip, I said, hanging my hat on the hook. Your mom feeling better already? She looked up at me, and I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. Miles, I need to talk to you. About what? I kept my voice neutral. She stopped, bit her lip. I haven't been honest with you. Is that right? I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. What haven't you been honest about, Helen? The tears started then, running down her cheeks in streams. I've been seeing someone. Another man. I'm so sorry, Miles. I never meant for it to happen. It just... Just what? I interrupted. Just happened? You just accidentally spent 4 months sleeping with a 24-year-old insurance salesman? You just accidentally spent thousands of our dollars on fancy dinners and hotel rooms? Her face went white. You knew? I knew, I confirmed. Been knowing for weeks now. Saw you leaving the Riverside Motel with him. Watched you lie to my face every single day since then. Miles, please. She reached across the table, but I pulled my hands back. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice cold and steady. You're going to tell me everything, every detail. And then I'm going to decide what comes next. She told me. All of it. How she'd met Lewis at the coffee shop downtown, how he'd flirted with her, made her feel young and attractive again, how the affair started with coffee dates that turned into lunches, lunches that turned into afternoons at the motel, how he made her feel alive in ways she hadn't felt in years. He made you feel alive, I repeated slowly. What the hell do you think I've been doing all these years, Helen? I've been working myself to the bone to provide for you, to give you a good life. I've been faithful, honest, and present. But that wasn't enough, was it? It's not about you, she sobbed. You're a good man, Miles. You've always been good to me. I wanted excitement. I wanted passion. So you destroyed our marriage for passion, I said. Tell me something. This Lewis character, does he know you're married? She nodded miserably. Yes. And he didn't care? He said he loved me. He said we could make it work. I laughed, a harsh sound that made her flinch. Helen, that boy doesn't love you. He loves the thrill of sneaking around with a married woman. You were entertainment to him, a toy. That's not true. Then where is he now? I demanded. Why isn't he here, fighting for you? I'll tell you why, because yesterday he got a message. A clear message about what happens to men who disrespect other people's marriages, and instead of standing by you, he ran scared. Her eyes widened. That was you? Miles, what did you do? Nothing he didn't deserve, I said. Don't worry, he's fine. Just a little bruised and a lot more aware of his mistakes. But here's the thing, Helen. He got off easy. A few punches, a scared afternoon. You know what you gave him? You gave him our money, our trust, our marriage. And for what? She was crying so hard now she could barely speak. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, Miles, please forgive me. I'll end it with Lewis. I'll do anything. Just please don't leave me. I stood up, looking down at this woman I'd once loved with everything in me. You want forgiveness? You want me to pretend this never happened? Go back to how things were? Yes, she whispered. Please, yes. I can't do that, I said quietly. Because the woman I married wouldn't have done this to me. The woman I married had integrity and loyalty. I don't know who you are anymore, Helen. I don't think I want to know. She fell to her knees then, grabbing at my hands, begging. Please, Miles. I love you. I made a mistake, but I love you. Don't throw away 8 years. Don't do this. I pulled away from her, stepping back. You're the one who threw it away, I said. Every time you met him, every lie you told, every dollar you spent, that was you making a choice. You chose him over me, over us, over everything we built. I chose wrong, she cried. I know I did. But people make mistakes, Miles. Good people make bad choices. You can't just give up on us. Can I? I walked to the window, looking out at the land I'd worked my whole life. You know what the worst part is? It's not even the affair. It's the disrespect. You treated me like I was stupid, like I wouldn't notice, like I didn't matter enough to be honest with. I was scared, she said weakly, scared of losing you. So your solution was to cheat on me? I turned back to face her. That's not logic, Helen. That's selfishness. She stayed on her knees, tears streaming down her face. What can I do? Tell me what to do to fix this. Nothing, I said. There's nothing to fix. It's broken beyond repair. You made your choice when you walked into that motel room the first time. You kept making it every time after that. Now I'm making mine. You're leaving me? No, I said. You're leaving. I'm staying right here on my land, in my house. You're going to pack your things, and you're going to find somewhere else to live. We'll work out the divorce details through lawyers. The house, the ranch, those are yours? She asked, and I heard something calculating in her voice even now, even through the tears. They were mine before we married, I reminded her. My grandfather's land, passed down to my father, passed down to me. You got no claim to it. We'll see what a judge says about that, she shot back. And there it was, the real Helen, showing through the tears and apologies. You really want to go to court? I asked. You want to tell a judge about your affair? Show them the credit card statements, the hotel receipts? Because I kept all of it, Helen. Every single piece of evidence. She went pale again. You wouldn't. Try me, I said coldly. You think Louis is going to stand by you through a messy divorce? You think he's going to want his name dragged through court? Have his family find out he was sleeping with a married woman? That boy will disappear so fast you'll get whiplash. You're cruel, she whispered. No, I corrected. I'm done being a fool. There's a difference. She got up off the floor slowly, wiping at her face. I need time. To find a place, to figure things out. You've got 2 weeks, I said. After that, anything you left behind becomes mine to dispose of. And Helen? Don't even think about trying to take anything that isn't yours. I've got cameras installed now, everywhere. That was a lie, but she didn't know that. I thought you loved me, she said, her voice breaking. I did, I replied. Past tense. The woman I loved wouldn't have betrayed me. You're someone else now, someone I don't know and don't care to. She stood there for a long moment, staring at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Maybe she was. Maybe for the first time, she was seeing the man instead of the fool she'd been taking advantage of. I'll start packing tomorrow, she finally said. Good, I replied. I'll be sleeping in the guest room until you're gone. And Helen? Don't try to contact Louis. After what happened to him yesterday, I don't think he'll be answering your calls anyway. What did you have done to him? She asked, something like horror in her voice. Nothing permanent, I said. Just a reminder that actions have consequences. Something both of you seem to have forgotten. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Helen moved through the house like a ghost, packing her things in silence. We didn't speak unless we had to. She tried a few more times to convince me to change my mind. Tears and apologies and promises that meant nothing. I stayed firm. Every time I wavered, every time I thought maybe I was being too harsh, I remembered her walking out of that motel room. I remembered the lies, the wasted money, the disrespect. And I remembered that she'd only confessed because she got caught, because Louis had called her scared and hurt. Not because she felt guilty, not because she loved me. Tommy told me that Louis had left town, taking a transfer to his father's company office 3 states over. Apparently, the beating had scared him more than I'd intended. Part of me felt guilty about that. But mostly, I felt satisfied. He'd learned his lesson about respecting other people's marriages. Helen tried calling him, I'm sure, though I never asked. Whatever happened between them after that Friday, she kept to herself. Maybe he told her the truth, that she'd been a fling, nothing more. Maybe he just stopped answering. Either way, by the 2nd week, she'd stopped trying to defend him. On her last day in the house, Helen stood in the kitchen where we'd shared so many meals, looking around like she was trying to memorize it. I really am sorry, Miles, she said, for what it's worth. It's worth nothing, I replied. Sorry doesn't fix broken trust. Will you ever forgive me? I thought about that question. Really thought about it. Maybe someday, I said honestly. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean taking you back. What you did changed everything. I know, she whispered. I wish I could go back and make different choices. We all wish that, I said. But we can't. We just have to live with what we've done. She picked up her last suitcase, the one with her makeup and jewelry. Take care of yourself, Miles. Always do, I replied. I watched from the porch as she loaded her car. She'd found an apartment in town above the hardware store. It was small, nothing like the house she was leaving. She'd have to find a job, probably go back to waitressing. The comfortable life she'd had on the ranch was over. She got in her Honda and started the engine. For a moment, she just sat there, looking at the house, at me, standing on the porch, at the life she was leaving behind. Then she put the car in drive and pulled away, dust kicking up from the gravel driveway. I stood there until her car disappeared down the road. Then I went inside, poured myself a whiskey, and sat at the kitchen table. The house was quiet, emptier than it had ever been, but it was mine again, mine and mine alone. No more lies, no more betrayal, no more pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in 2 weeks. The sheets smelled like laundry detergent instead of Helen's expensive perfume. It felt right. The next morning I got up before dawn like always and went out to tend the cattle. The work was the same as it had been before Helen, the same as it would be after. Cattle don't care about your personal problems. They need feeding and water and medical attention, and they need it whether you're heartbroken or angry or lost. There was comfort in that. Comfort in the routine, in the physical labor, in doing something productive and real. Spab called me around noon. "Hey, Miles, just wanted to check in. How you holding up?" "I'm all right," I said. "Helen moved out yesterday." "Yeah, I heard. Small town talk, you know how it is? You need anything, you let me know." "Actually," I said, "I do need something. I need to move on. Stop thinking about all this." "Time, brother," Spab said. "That's all that works. Time and staying busy. You got plenty of work to keep you occupied." He was right about that. Ranch work never ends. There's always something that needs fixing, some animal that needs attention, some fence that needs mending. I threw myself into it. Every day, up before sunrise, working until my back ached and my hands were raw. I fixed things that didn't need fixing, cleaned barns that were already clean, organized equipment that was already organized. The physical exhaustion helped. It meant I fell into bed at night, too tired to think, too tired to replay the whole mess in my mind. Tommy and Jack never brought up what happened. They just showed up every morning, did their work, and left me alone with my thoughts. Good men, both of them, the kind you can count on when things get hard. About 3 weeks after Helen left, I ran into Lewis's father at the feed store, Richard Brennan, owner of Brennan Insurance, pillar of the community. He looked at me with something like embarrassment in his eyes. "Miles," he said, nodding. "How are you?" "Fine, Richard. You?" "Good, good." He hesitated. "Listen, I heard about the situation with Helen and my son. I just want you to know I had no idea Lewis was involved with a married woman. If I had known, I would have put a stop to it." "It's done now," I said. "Lewis left town, I understand." "Yeah," Richard said, looking uncomfortable. "Took a position in our Phoenix office. Fresh start, you know? Kid needed to grow up, learn some responsibility. I'm sorry for what happened, Miles. You didn't deserve that." "No, I didn't," I agreed. "But life ain't about what we deserve. It's about what we do with what we get." He nodded, seeming relieved I wasn't going to make a scene. "Well, if you ever need anything, insurance-wise or otherwise, you let me know." I thanked him and left. It wasn't Richard's fault his son was a selfish kid with no moral compass. But I appreciated that he'd acknowledged it, hadn't tried to defend Lewis or pretend it was all Helen's doing. Some people still had integrity. The divorce proceedings were ugly, but quick. Helen tried to claim she deserved half of everything, despite the prenup we'd signed before the wedding. Her lawyer argued emotional distress, years of service to the marriage, all the usual arguments. My lawyer countered with the affair, the evidence of her spending our joint money on her lover, the fact that she'd abandoned the marriage. In the end, the judge wasn't sympathetic to Helen. She got nothing except what she'd brought into the marriage, her car, her personal belongings, and a small settlement of $10,000. The ranch, the house, the cattle, all of it stayed mine. The judge made it clear that adultery still meant something in his courtroom. Helen didn't show up for the final hearing. She sent her lawyer to sign the papers, I heard later that she'd moved 2 towns over, working at a diner and living in a small apartment. Lewis hadn't come back for her, hadn't even called, according to the gossip. She was alone, starting over at 32, with nothing to show for 8 years of marriage except regrets. I should have felt triumphant. This was my revenge, after all. I'd planned it, executed it, and won. Helen had lost everything. Lewis had run away, scared, and I kept my land and my dignity. But standing in that courtroom, signing the papers that ended my marriage, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, and older, and aware that revenge, no matter how justified, doesn't fill the hole that betrayal leaves behind. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was having a beer at Murphy's Bar downtown with Tommy when a woman approached our table. She was probably in her late 20s, blonde, pretty, in a hard sort of way. "You're Miles Carter, right?" she asked. "That's me," I said carefully. "I'm Jessica. I was dating Lewis Brennan before he met your wife." She pulled out a chair and sat down without being invited. "I heard what happened. Heard about the whole mess with Helen." "Not really something I like to discuss," I said. "I bet," she said. "But I thought you should know something. Lewis did that a lot. Went after married women, I mean. It was like a game to him. He told me once that there was something exciting about stealing another man's wife. Made him feel powerful." I stared at her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired of men like Lewis getting away with this crap," she said bluntly. "He used me, dumped me for your wife, then dumped her for someone else. Last I heard, he's doing the same thing in Phoenix, and I figured you deserved to know that it wasn't really about Helen. She was just another conquest to him, nothing special." After she left, Tommy looked at me. "You all right, boss?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "I think I am." Because she was right. It had never been about Helen being unsatisfied or me being inadequate. It had been about Lewis being a predator who got his kicks from causing pain, and Helen being weak enough to fall for his game. It didn't excuse what Helen did. Nothing could excuse that. But it put it in perspective somehow. She hadn't left me for something better. She'd been manipulated by someone who made a sport of destroying marriages. "Another beer?" Tommy asked. "Yeah," I said. "I think I'll have another." We sat there in comfortable silence, 2 men who'd worked together long enough that we didn't need to fill the quiet with words. The bar was warm and familiar, full of people I'd known my whole life. This was my place, my town, my community. Helen was out there somewhere, dealing with the consequences of her choices. Lewis was in Phoenix, probably ruining someone else's life. And I was here, on my land, with my cattle and my ranch and my dignity intact. Was it enough? Maybe not. Maybe I'd never really get over the betrayal, never fully trust another woman again. Maybe Helen had broken something in me that couldn't be fixed. But I was still standing, still working my land, still paying my bills, still looking at myself in the mirror every morning without shame. That counted for something. That night, driving home under a sky full of stars, I thought about everything that had happened. The discovery, the planning, the revenge, the divorce. All of it had seemed so important at the time, so necessary. And maybe it was. Maybe I'd needed to take control, to show Helen and Lewis that there were consequences for their actions. But now, with months of distance, I could see it clearly. The revenge hadn't healed me. It had just given me temporary satisfaction, a brief sense of control in a situation where I'd had none. The real healing came from the work, from getting up every morning and doing what needed to be done, from maintaining my integrity even when Helen had lost hers, from treating people with respect even when I'd been disrespected. That's what separated me from people like Helen and Lewis, not intelligence or strength or cleverness. Character. Spring came to the ranch the way it always did, with new calves being born and the fields turning green after the winter brown. I'd hired a new ranch hand to replace Tommy, who'd retired to spend more time with his grandkids. Life moved forward. whether you were ready or not. I heard through the grapevine that Helen was engaged to some guy she'd met at the diner where she worked, a truck driver, divorced with 3 kids. I felt nothing when I heard the news. No anger, no jealousy, no satisfaction. Just nothing. She'd become a stranger to me, someone I used to know in another life. Louis, according to Jessica, who'd become a friend of sorts, had been fired from his father's Phoenix office for inappropriate conduct with a client. Some things never change. Richard Brennan had finally cut his son off, told him to make his own way in the world. Maybe it would help. Maybe Louis would finally learn that actions have consequences. I doubted it. But stranger things had happened. As for me, I kept working the ranch, kept getting up before dawn, kept tending the cattle, kept fixing what needed fixing. Some of my friends tried to set me up on dates, told me I needed to get back out there. I wasn't interested. Maybe someday I'd be ready to trust someone again. But not yet. Not now. For now, this was enough. The land, the work, the life I'd built with my own hands. Helen hadn't taken that from me. She'd tried, but she'd failed. Everything that mattered, everything that was real, it was still here. Still mine. On a warm evening in May, I sat on my porch with a beer, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and red. The cattle were quiet in the pasture, the work was done for the day, and the house behind me was clean and orderly. Mine alone, but mine. I thought about that afternoon at the motel, seeing Helen with Louis. The moment that had changed everything. Part of me wished I'd never seen it, never known. But that was foolish thinking. Better to know the truth, no matter how painful, than to live a lie. Helen had made her choice. I'd made mine. And in the end, I'd kept what mattered most, my self-respect, my integrity, my land. She'd lost everything trying to find something she already had. That was her tragedy, not mine. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and do it all again. And the day after that, and the day after that. Because that's what you do. You keep going. You survive. You endure. I finished my beer and stood up, stretching muscles sore from a long day's work. The night air was cool and clean, carrying the smell of hay and earth. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Life on the ranch, continuing as it always had, as it always would. Inside, I washed my glass and set it in the dish rack. The kitchen was spotless. I'd learned to keep things clean, cook my own meals, manage the household on my own. Things I'd let Helen handle during our marriage, thinking I was doing her a favor by focusing on the ranch work. Now I knew better. A man should be able to take care of himself, not depend on someone else for basic living. I walked through the house, turning off lights, checking locks. In the bedroom, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos. There were still some of Helen and me from the early years. I'd kept meaning to delete them, but never had. Tonight, I finally did. One by one, I sent them to the trash. Not out of anger or bitterness, but because they represented a person who no longer existed. That Miles, the one who'd trusted blindly and loved without reservation, was gone. In his place was someone harder, wiser, more careful. Whether that was better or worse, I couldn't say. It just was. Before bed, I checked my bank account on my phone, something I did every night now. The balance was healthy, growing steadily without Helen's secret spending. The ranch was profitable, the cattle prices were good, and I'd even managed to save enough to buy an additional 50 acres from my neighbor who was retiring. The land would stay in production, stay in good hands. That mattered to me more than I could explain. I set my alarm for 4:30 the way I always did. Early mornings were the best time on a ranch, quiet, peaceful, with the whole day stretching out ahead full of possibilities. I'd learned to appreciate those solitary hours, just me and the work that needed doing. Sleep came easier these days. For the first few months after Helen left, I'd lie awake replaying everything, analyzing where I'd gone wrong, what I could have done differently. But eventually, I'd realize the truth. I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd been a good husband, a faithful partner, a hard worker. The failure was Helen's, not mine. And once I'd accepted that, truly accepted it, the insomnia had faded. The next morning, I was up with the alarm, coffee brewing by 4:45. I took my mug out to the porch and watched the sun rise over the eastern pasture. The sky turned from black to deep blue to pink to orange, a daily miracle I never got tired of watching. This land, this life, it was worth everything I'd been through to keep it. At 6 o'clock, Jack arrived for work. He'd been promoted to foreman after Tommy left, and he'd proven himself more than capable. He poured himself coffee from the pot I always kept going in the barn office, and we went over the day's tasks. "Got a buyer coming to look at those yearling steers this afternoon," Jack said. "Should get a good price if the market holds." "Good," I said. "We'll run them through the chute this morning, make sure they look their best." We worked in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from mutual respect and shared purpose. Jack had never asked about Helen, never pried into my personal business. He just showed up, did excellent work, and treated me with the loyalty I deserved. That meant more to me than he'd ever know. Around noon, a truck pulled up the driveway. I recognized it immediately. Spab's new Ford, shiny and black. He climbed out, grinning. "Thought I'd swing by, see how you're doing," he said, shaking my hand. "Been a while." "Too long," I agreed. "Come on in. I'll make lunch." We sat at the kitchen table eating sandwiches and chips, talking about nothing important. Football, weather, the price of feed. Normal conversation between old friends. But as we finished eating, Spab's expression turned serious. "I heard Helen's getting married again," he said carefully. "Yeah, I heard that too," I replied. "Hope it works out better for her this time." Spab studied me. "You really mean that?" I thought about it. "I don't wish her harm," I said finally. "I don't wish her anything at all, really. She's just someone I used to know. What she does with her life now is her business." "That's mature of you," Spab said. "I don't know if I could be that generous." "It's not generosity," I corrected. "It's indifference. There's a difference. When you care about someone, whether you love them or hate them, they still have power over you. I don't feel anything for Helen anymore. She's just nothing to me, and that's how I know I've moved on." Spab nodded slowly. "Makes sense. And what about you? You seeing anyone?" "No," I said. "Not interested right now. Maybe not ever. I'm good on my own." "Every man needs companionship," Spab argued. "I've got friends, ranch hands, neighbors," I countered. "I've got this land and the work it provides. That's enough companionship for me. Besides, after what happened with Helen, I'm not sure I could trust someone again. Not enough to let them into my life that way." "That's sad, Miles," Spab said quietly. "Letting what Helen did make you close yourself off." "Maybe," I admitted. "Or maybe it's smart. Maybe I'm just being realistic about my limitations. Not every man is meant to be partnered up. Some of us do better alone." After Spab left, I thought about his words. Was I closing myself off? Probably. But it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like protection, like wisdom earned through hard experience. I'd opened my heart once and gotten it torn apart. Why would I volunteer for that again? The cattle buyer arrived at 3 o'clock, a weathered man in his 60s who'd been in the business longer than I'd been alive. We walked the pasture together, examining the steers, discussing weight and quality and market conditions. He made a fair offer, and I accepted. We shook hands, and he said he'd send his crew to pick up the cattle on Friday. "You run a good operation here, Miles," he said. "Your father would be proud." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. My father had died 5 years ago, before all this mess with Helen. I was glad he hadn't lived to see his son's marriage fall apart. He'd liked Helen, thought she was good for me. He'd been wrong, but he'd meant well. That evening, I drove into town for supplies. The feed store, the hardware store, the grocery store, all places I'd been going for years, where everyone knew my name and my business. The divorce had been public knowledge, of course. Small towns don't keep secrets. But people had been kind about it, offering sympathy without prying, support without judgment. At the grocery store, I ran into Sarah Mitchell, who'd been in my graduating class 20 years ago. She was divorced too, with 2 teenagers, working as a nurse at the county hospital. "Miles," she said warmly. "Good to see you." "You too, Sarah," I replied, meaning it. She'd always been nice, smart, and funny without being cruel about it. "Listen," she said, somewhat hesitantly. "Some of us are getting together Friday night at Murphy's. Just old classmates catching up. You should come." I almost said no automatically, but something made me pause. "What time?" I asked. 8 o'clock, she said, looking pleased. "It'll be fun. Low-key, just friends." "I'll try to make it," I said, surprising myself. Driving home, I wondered what had made me agree. Maybe Spab was right. Maybe I was closing myself off too much. There was a difference between protecting yourself and isolating yourself. I didn't need to date anyone, didn't need romance or complications. But friendship, that was different. That was safe. Friday night came, and I almost talked myself out of going. But at 7:30, I showered, put on clean jeans and a decent shirt, and drove into town. Murphy's was crowded, full of people I'd known my entire life. Sarah waved me over to a table in the back where 5 or 6 familiar faces were gathered. We talked and laughed, sharing stories about high school, updating each other on our lives, remembering teachers and events from 20 years ago. It felt good, normal. Like maybe I was still part of the world, not just isolated on my ranch with my cattle and my work. Around 10 o'clock, Sarah walked me out to my truck. "I'm glad you came," she said. "You seemed like yourself tonight, like the Miles I remember from school." "Maybe I'm finding my way back to him," I said. "Good," she said. "That Miles was a good guy. Still is, I'm sure. Just been through a rough patch." Driving home under a sky full of stars, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not for romance or a second chance at marriage, but hope that maybe life could be good again. Different than before, but good in its own way. The ranch looked beautiful in the moonlight, the white fences gleaming, the barn solid and strong. My grandfather had built that barn with his own hands 70 years ago. My father had maintained it, improved it, passed it down to me. This was my legacy, my anchor, the one thing that could never be taken from me. Inside, I didn't pour myself a drink. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Helen's betrayal, my calculated revenge, the divorce, the slow, painful process of rebuilding my life. I'd gotten my revenge. Helen had lost everything, her home, her marriage, her comfortable life. Louis had been beaten and scared off, probably still looking over his shoulder. I'd kept my land, my dignity, my self-respect. But sitting there in the quiet kitchen, I realized something I hadn't expected. The revenge hadn't made me whole again. It had been satisfying in the moment, had given me a sense of control and justice. But it hadn't healed the wound Helen had left. Only time had done that. Time and work and the slow acceptance that some things can't be fixed, only endured. Helen was gone. Louis was gone. The betrayal was in the past. And I was still here, still standing, still moving forward one day at a time. Was I happy? Not in the way I'd been happy before Helen's affair, back when I'd believed in forever and trusted without question. That kind of innocent happiness was gone, and it wasn't coming back. But I was content. I had my land, my work, my integrity. I had friends like Spab and Tommy who'd stood by me. I had the respect of my community and the satisfaction of knowing I'd handled a terrible situation with as much dignity as I could manage. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all anyone could really ask for. To survive the worst life throws at you and come out the other side still standing, still yourself, still capable of finding meaning in the work and the land and the quiet moments of peace. I finished my water and stood up, turning off the kitchen light. Tomorrow would start early, the way it always did. Cattle to feed, fences to mend, the endless work of maintaining a ranch. But I didn't dread it. The work gave me purpose, structure, a reason to keep going. In the bedroom, I set my alarm and climbed into bed. The sheets were clean, the room was quiet, and the house was mine. No lies, no betrayal, no secrets. Just honest work and honest living. As I closed my eyes, I thought one last time about Helen, about the woman I'd married and the woman she'd become, about Lewis and his games, about Richard Brennan's embarrassed apology, about Jessica's revelation that I'd never been the problem. None of it mattered anymore. The past was the past, and I'd done what I needed to do. I'd protected what was mine, punished those who'd wronged me, and moved on with my life. Helen would have to live with her choices. Lewis would have to live with his. And I would live with mine. The difference was, I could look at myself in the mirror every morning without shame. Could they say the same? I doubted it. Sleep came easily, and with it, the knowledge that tomorrow would be another day of honest work on honest land. The ranch would be here long after all of us were gone. Me, Helen, Lewis, everyone. The land endured, and so would I.